I think that's pretty good. Why don't we go ahead and get started? So first and foremost, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jake from Exxat, and I will be one of your co-hosts today. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for joining us, our webinar, Optimizing Compliance Management in Clinical Education with Exxat Approve. Helping me on the webinar today are my co-hosts Kunal, Shital, and Vipul, as well as Jennifer Miller from Shenandoah's PA program. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive a copy of the recording 2 hours after the webinar has ended. You'll also be able to find the recording on Exxat YouTube, which will be posted under Exxat Approve. And if you'd like to follow along, you can find today's presentation attached in the handout section under the GoToWebinar control panel. Please use the question section to ask any questions or comments throughout the presentation. We'll also be monitoring for questions and addressing them as the presentation allows. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat box and one of my colleagues will assist you. Today, we have an audience from multiple different disciplines, and we'll be using screenshots and data from different disciplines across our slides. We'll also use a combination of Prism's live system and slides throughout the course of the webinar. And without further ado, why don't we go ahead and cover today's agenda. Now, first off, we're going to start with the Prism ecosystem, which I'll hand off to my colleague Kunal in a moment here. I'll then cover the Exxat Approve workflow. We will then actually go into the live system itself, and I will show you what everything looks like firsthand. I'll hand it off to Jennifer for practical application. Then we'll circle back around to wrap up with implementation and onboarding and what that looks like. Finally, why use Exxat Approve? So at this point, I will go ahead and hand it off to Kunal.
Well, thank you, Jay. I'll talk a little bit about the capabilities of how compliance is integrated within the Prism module. I know some of you might still be in version 3. Most of you have already moved over to Prism, which is our clinical education platform. And one of the biggest advantages of the Prism platform is it combines the power of clinical education with compliance tracking, obviously along with all of the different capabilities around evaluations, timesheets, and placements. You know, when you think about the different applications out there, right, you are already working with your LMS systems, SIS systems, different applications to manage different data sets. So one of our main goals in creating Prism as a platform was to give you one single view into all of these different data points. So when we started to redesign Prism a few years ago, one of our main goals was to include the compliance tracking capabilities within the application itself. And today through this webinar, we'll highlight how the compliance can be managed and tracked in the system. And why is it so important, right? When you think about your student experience, especially, and you think about tracking your students right from admissions all the way to graduation, especially and as they're beginning the clinical rotations. If you have different systems out there to track student compliance, which doesn't talk to your clinical placement systems, you just have those different data points and data sets that now you have to commingle and figure out, is the student really ready from a rotation perspective with all of the immunization and health clearance requirements there. So we have tried to integrate all of the compliance tracking capabilities into the Prism as a platform, and that's what, you know, I think we are one of the Exxat is one of the only few systems that I've seen out there that combines all of these capabilities together in a one single platform there. So if you move on to the next slide, Jake, please. What I wanted to share a little bit is some of the history behind Approve. So we started Approve as a business service. So all of you guys are subscribed to Prism as a platform, right? But a lot of the times I get this question, is Approve a different product? What is Approve, right? So Approve is actually a service that we have created using the capabilities of the Prism platform itself. We started this service about 7 years ago now, gosh. You know, there was a PT program who approached us in 2017 and said, hey, you know what, you guys are already providing us the capability to track compliance on your systems. Can we just go ahead and review it on our behalf if you give you the guidelines? So that really started the germination of the idea of, hey, let's create a service and an experience so that our clients are able to leverage not only the platform, but also get the service that they want in terms of medical professionals coming in and reviewing and approving the documents. So 7 years ago, Approve service was started. I'm glad to note that we have now 500 different health sciences program now actively using our Approve service, and from all different disciplines, whether it be PT, OT, physician assistant, nursing, both undergraduate and graduate degree programs, different kind of certificate programs. There are certain colleges who have said, you know what, we would want to use Approve as part of our admission requirement also. So we have really seen the service being used soup to nuts in terms of adoption and the different disciplines. When we started 7 years ago, we had 2 members dedicated to reviewing and approving the documents, but now we have a 40+ dedicated Exxat Approve team. They are all medical professionals with medical background, and until now we have reviewed 6 million different kinds of documents. And why is this important, right? The reason I bring this up is we have seen a lot of different variety of documents, ranging from immunization tracking document. When COVID hit, right, we work with our clients to understand what are the different kind of COVID vaccination requirements should we build into the system and track in the platform there. There are schools who have partnered with our partner Universal to also do their background checks and drug screenings directly through within Exxat itself there. So we really have seen the service blossom. Last year itself, we had about 52,000 students that we went to the Approve service, and we cleared them from a clinical perspective there. So again, the service has blossomed quite a bit. We have seen a lot of institutional level adoption also, along with program level adoption too there. So next slide, please. Now, before I hand it off to Jake, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges I've seen in this ecosystem and with the compliance landscape here. Some of you answered in the poll that you guys are using Excel spreadsheets. Well, imagine working on compliance with Excel spreadsheets. If you have a cohort of 20 students, 40 students, 100 students, and you have to track 10 documents per student, that list quickly grows, right? And having all of this implemented in either an external system or spreadsheets just becomes a logistical nightmare and can lead to accreditation or compliance issues down the line. Obviously, looking at data in different systems is manual and time consuming in terms of retrieving that information. I know a lot of the health systems now are also asking for attestation documents, right? Which says, hey, before your students go out in the clinicals, I don't need to see a complete proof of the document you have stored, but I need as a clinical coordinator or as a DCE to attest that the students are completely compliant with their all of the immunization requirements. Now, so that if that's stored now in Excel spreadsheet or some other system, you can imagine the amount of time it might require to have this data pulled up and submitted to your clinical sites. Also, different people have different needs in terms of having visibility into compliance. What do I mean by that? If you are a program director, one of your main goals is to make sure, hey, are my students good to go, right? I don't need to go down to that level of detail and open up every single document. If you are a clinical coordinator, a clinical assistant, right, or a DCE, your job would be essentially making sure that all of the documents are fully reviewed and approved, right? If you are a dean, right, you want to make sure that all of the students across all of your programs are ready from a compliance perspective and looking at all of the documentation risk requirements there. So what we have done in Prism, especially in the compliance module, is we have given those role-based access kind of a system so that you are able to better control who has visibility and can access each of those documents. From a FERPA and HIPAA perspective also, there's a lot of renewed significance and focus on making sure that only the right people have access to those documents, especially when we think about some of the professions we worked with, like physician assistant. In ARC-PA, there's actually a guideline that sits out there saying only the relevant people need to have visibility into those documents there. So we have designed access controls and privacy at such a level that every person can see, essentially, depending upon the rights, who has completed the documents, and someone can also look at the documents as appropriate there. And the last but not the least, right, we talked about this. If you have data sitting out in multiple systems, which is disparate, it just leads to a more convoluted reporting process and a more cumbersome overall compliance process. So those are some of the challenges that we have seen out there. not very unique, I would say. Most of you would agree that this might be some of the similar challenges that you might be facing today, or you might have faced before adopting Exxat Approve's process. So having said that, Jake, let's go into the system and talk how the system is orchestrated in terms of Approve.
Thank you, Kunal. Appreciate it. I'd like to start with a high-level overview of how does the Approve workflow work. So we'll go into each one of these sections individually very quickly, and then after summarizing this workflow here, we'll dive into the system itself so I can show you what everything looks like firsthand. So first and foremost, step number one is going to be creating a compliance list. Now, what is a compliance list and what does it consist of? Well, some examples of these, they're often meeting admission or clinical site requirements. So immunizations, certifications, school forms, cards and documents, anything of this nature. If you can give us guidelines on how to go about reviewing one of these documents, we can review it on your behalf. Now, setting it up within the actual system itself, this is something our Approve team will sit down with you and do in a one-on-one meeting or multiple administrator meeting, if you will, with one of our Approve specialists. And the idea here is that you're going to identify various categories to house these requirements underneath. Now, underneath each of these requirements, you'll be able to determine how you want that requirement to operate within the system and how the students view that. Now, once you've created that list and you've published it, students will then begin to upload the documentation. Now, when a student logs in, this is their homepage here. It's very straightforward and navigational friendly from a interface perspective. And we have an orientation video. I believe less than 10% of all of our students have ever watched that orientation video. And that's just to say they get the hang of things pretty quickly. Now you'll notice the attestations up here at the top. This will be important later because we're going to want the student to sign off on the sharing of their information for onboarding purposes. But let's focus on compliance for a moment here. Now, very quickly, we can see automatically this 3 documents need the student's attention. So if the student were to click compliance here, it's then going to take them into a page like this, where they will see all of your published requirements that you require them to upload. Now, a couple of things to point out here, a due date column and an expiration date column. We'll dive into that more in a little bit here, but this is how the system will send out automatic notifications that our team will set up and also send manual notifications as needed. Now, if we look at any individual line item here, let's take Hep B, for example, we can see that this particular one is in progress. And if I pull that up, I can see all the submitted document information along with this requirement here. Now, if I'm the student and I'm going to go ahead and click on the pencil icon, this is where I can upload any supporting documentation, include any notes, and depending on how you configure the requirement, add multiple dose dates in this particular scenario. Now, notice multiple file formats are supported. I get asked this question somewhat frequently. Can students upload, different types of formats? The answer is yes. Now, if the student were to click upload file, they then just upload the supporting documentation. Now let's go ahead and move on to step 3. The Approve team begins reviewing that documentation. We will review within a 48 to 72 hour period. And most of the time, this is to say, if it's going to be 72 hours, let's say a student submits a document on Friday, but our team doesn't get to it until Monday. That's really the only case that it ever takes for 72 hours. But let's go ahead and look at guidelines for review. Now, when you're setting up documents within the system, you can enable a simplified or a detailed view. We have standard templates built out, and you can simply configure those depending on what you want. Now, we have guidelines for students over here on the right. This is what our team of reviewers will use to review the documentation. Guidelines for reviewers down here is any special instructions that pertain to this particular document that you would like our team to know. And as our team is reviewing, we can select multiple different statuses here. Let's say, for example, our team disapproves a document. That disapproval will always be accompanied by a reason. So you can see a list of reasons here. I can scroll down to select more, but our team will always accompany a disapproval by a reason and maybe include comments or notes for next steps. Now, moving on, let's go to the alerts and the alerts that our team would send to keep your students up to date. Now, you can determine a frequency at which emails go out that the students receive directly to their school email if you're using single sign-on. The students can use their existing university credentials to log into the platform, and they receive that email notifying them these documents require your action. Now, this is, again, something our team will take care of, and you can view the status of the notifications or the emails that are being sent out here. So did the student open the email? Are they paying attention, or was it just delivered? So you can see the notes there as well. Now, you'll also be able to enable auto notifications, and this is what the email will look like in the student's inbox. If you want to send a summary of all the documents that the students have uploaded, it will come out looking just like this. Now, this wording here is configurable, and you can have the email say whatever you'd like it to say, and you can use multiple different templates to send those notifications out, which our team will take care of. Now, running reports. There's multiple ways to run reports in the system, but you have a dashboard. This dashboard is going to summarize all the data for you nicely. And something nice that I'll show you about it in the system is it's interactive. Now, if we want to take a look at a different type of report here, I have a crosswalk report where I have a list of all my students along the left, the individual requirements up top here, and the statuses associated with each. So I can look at everything holistically. And if I click the document details report, everything within the system is extractable. You can extract it into Word, PDF, Excel, depending on the type of data you're trying to extract. But this is one example of a document details report that I can pull. Now, the final step, sharing the profile with the sites. Student's profile from an administrator point of view will look like this, and we have the share profile button up here at the top. Now, if I were to click this, it's then going to present me with a screen that looks like this, where I can choose to include or omit as much information as I'd like. So oftentimes from an onboarding perspective, when you're sending the students information, you don't need to send everything that the student has included in their profile, so we give you that option here. Students can also use this to share post-grad for potential future employment or even grad school, or just to share it at will. Now, when this notification goes out, the sites will receive an email that looks like this. Again, the language is customizable. The logo will match your university's logo, and the preceptor or the site liaison can click this, and they will be able to see all the documentation that they require from an onboarding perspective. Now, at this point, I would like to dive into the actual system itself. So let me go ahead and dive in here. And before I do, though, I want to stop for questions. So Shital, I want to give just a moment here. Have any questions been asked that you want to address at this point?
So the one question that just came in that was unanswered is, what is the time frame on reminder emails sent to the student for their requirements? This is a customized time frame. You can choose for it to be on a weekly basis or bi-weekly, twice in a week or once in 2 weeks. It is going to be fully customized to what you would like your students to receive.
Great.
And for now, that is our only question.
Great, yeah. You can also increase the frequency leading up to clinicals as well. So if you want to start out at once a week, and as the dates approach and they're getting closer, you can increase that frequency as well. So you send it out twice a week, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
No other questions, Jake?
Great. So let's go into the system. Now, this is what you see from a homepage perspective if you're subscribed to Prism as a whole. Now, I want to dive into compliance for the sake of this presentation, and we're going to go to setup first. Now, when I'm looking at the setup, this is exactly what you saw in the presentation. We'll identify various categories, and according to the CDC guidelines and all of the programs we've worked with, we have templates available that will suggest certain requirements that your program may need, but all of this is fully customizable. So again, we'll establish categories for each of these requirements, whether that's health and immunization, insurance and liability, attestations, etc. And for each document, you'll determine, okay, is it enabled or disabled for this particular cohort? Is it mandatory or is this requirement optional? Is review required for this particular document, and should it be included in the share profile link when the students are sharing this documentation or information? So we'll set up all of this on the back end, and this is something that our Approve team will assist you with. Now, once it's set up, the students, and you publish these requirements, the students will be able to begin uploading that documentation. So this screen should look familiar. I also showed this just in the presentation here. And if we go ahead and click on compliance, I see exactly what the student would see. This is the student view here. And if we go into any given document, this is where I can upload that supporting documentation as needed. So I can upload that file here, include any supporting information and dates as needed. And the students will just see, notice we talked about guidelines for reviewers and guidelines for students. The students only see the guidelines for students, which is what our team will use from a reviewer perspective, but the students will not see guidelines for reviewers. Now, switching back to the administrator side of things, let's go ahead and dive into the reports here. And if I go to class of 2022, we have our dashboards that we talked about. Now, obviously, leading up to clinical, some of this is going to be red or various different colors according to the statuses, but we want this all to be green eventually. So leading up to that point or on the way there, let's say I'm interested in all the documents that have been disapproved across my cohort. I can go ahead and click that here, and it's going to generate that customized report for me. Now, if I remove the filter, we have that crosswalk report that we showed briefly earlier, where I have my students along the left, requirements up top here, and the statuses associated with each. Now, this is a great place to showcase filters. Filters apply across the system as a whole, and it's going to allow you to narrow in on a specific data point or a set of data and really customize these reports. Now, for the sake of the presentation, let's go ahead and say I want to look at all the documents that are in red across my cohort that require some form of attention or action from my students. I can go ahead and apply those filters here. I see exactly which students and what documents require their attention. Now, while these filters are still active, I can go ahead and go over to notification here, select all, and this is something that our team will take care of. And this is you can determine the frequency at which these notifications go out, but the student will receive this directly to their email. Again, we have multiple templates if there's different ways that you want to communicate for various reasons. And it can be sent out manually or scheduled automatically to go out at a future date and time, which again, our team will take care of. Now that we have the history section over here on the right, you can see exactly what was sent out and what that email looks like and the status of each email, whether or not these students are actually opening the notifications. So that is everything that I had planned to share from a live demonstration perspective. I'm going to briefly stop again for questions and ask Shital, are there any other questions that you thought would be good to address at this time?
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a few questions, Jake. And I think because the presentation went very fast right now, I can stop for a few minutes. All right.
Actually, I have a couple more. So I can go in just a little bit further.
Well, let's do questions for a minute though. Sure. All right. So Piper had a question that I wanted to bring up. What happens when the requirement is overdue? So Piper, when the requirement is overdue, a notification can be set up to go out to the students. Let's say, a flu vaccination is overdue, right? Let's say you set up a date for October 1st for all of your students to get flu vaccinated there. And if a student falls behind, they can get auto notification, and an alert will also show up on the compliance dashboard saying something requires their attention from a documentation perspective there, along with an alert that goes out to their email there. Sandra Campbell had a question. Can students send their own profile link? So Jake, if you can go to the student side for a minute, please. So absolutely, Sandra. So when you go and look at students' profile, and this might seem familiar to you, Sandra, you see the shared profile on the top right from students' perspective. In this section, students are able to share their profile and also share relevant approved documents, right? So if any document is not approved as yet, it won't show up on this list also. As such, Sandra, but the students can pick and choose what document. There are certain sites who require proof of documentation to be submitted. So this is a great way for students to have accountability. Now, you can always tell some students can say, you know what, I don't want to share my compliance information. That's fine, it's optional there. So absolutely, students can share their own information in the system. When the communication goes out, to follow up to Piper's question, it's actually the notification email that goes out, Piper, to students. If you go to the notification slide, Jake, for a minute, please. Yeah, next one.
Oops, didn't go to the slide I wanted.
19.
There we go.
19, next one. Yeah, this one. So this is the template of what information will be sent out to the students, right? The information, and this template can be configured, and the frequency can also be configured in terms of what documents require students' attention. This is a summary email which tells the student, hey, this is the state of all of your documentation requirements. But you can also configure a notification to go out to the students if a document is essentially overdue. If a document has been disapproved, right, an immediate notification can also go out to the student, letting them know why a particular document was disapproved and the reason for that disapproval too there. Jennifer had a question about background checks and drug screenings. Great question, Jen. Is the school responsible to arrange background checks and drug screenings? We haven't covered that section here, so Jake, stay there for a minute, please. If you go to compliance section. Jen, we have partnered with a third-party company called Universal, where the background checks and the drug screenings can directly be integrated into Exxat. However, because we know that the schools might have different vendors they use, or they might have an internal health clinic where some of the drug screenings might be done also. So we have provided the ability for schools to actually use their own in-house clinic or other vendors too. So while Universal is directly integrated into Exxat and students can order their background checks and drug screenings directly from within the system, you can absolutely set it up that way. There's a question about downloading document from students' profile, Jake, there. Yeah. So if you can go to the administrative section for a minute, and Jake will cover that actually as part of the reporting, Ashton. So when you go onto the student profile, there's the compliance tile. So you can look at it both ways, Ashton, right? So you can look at it at student data, but if you go to students compliance or administrative section, also you get the similar kind of a report too. So you can download the PDF of the documents, of basically what they have uploaded. And this is a nice kind of a document that I love, right? Because this is a snapshot in terms of what students have done, and also gives you the details of what information has been uploaded in the system and some of the dates also there. This is kind of a portfolio from a compliance perspective, right? There are some systems out there, health systems out there, which actually require this data to be submitted before rotation begins. So this is a nice little view, along with an ability to download the document. And when I say downloading the document, assuming you have the appropriate roles in the system there, right? Because there are certain roles that you might not want to have people have the ability to download the document there. Lisette, great question. Students can absolutely upload drug screening results from another lab, not a problem. So if students go out to Quest, Concentra, LabCorp, and have their own test, students can absolutely upload their background checks and drug screenings too there. All right, there was a question which I think a few folks had asked in terms of site-specific requirements. So site-specific requirements are not covered under Exxat Approve, and the reason is that, you know, every site has their own requirements, right? Some sites say, you know what, I need additional paperwork to be submitted for X, Y, and Z. But typically, and Sheetal, I don't know if you want to add to this, and typically of how we have seen other schools add at least some of their more frequent site-specific requirements into the approved list there.
Yes, so the most common ones like background and drug screenings, we add those to the common list. Very site specific, such as attestations for when they go there for the first day, what the requirements are. Those are so site specific that if you work with 200 sites, that would be like 200 extra documents that each of your students would see. So we do not recommend creating them under the regular compliance, but there's a site specific area within PRISM where you can upload those requirements or additional documents for those sites where the students can upload and the school can monitor. Fantastic. And here is, oh, I thought Jake was showing us a little bit of where that goes.
I was.
Great. There was a question in terms of having override capabilities in the system. So Rachel asked a question, are we as administrators able to approve documents if needed? Absolutely, Rachel, right? You know, there are certain times when Approve will, let's say, reject a document based upon the guideline, but you as a school administrator might want to override that disapproval based upon school-specific cases or student-specific scenarios. So as an administrator, you have the ability to basically not only approve the documents as applicable, but also override any disapprovals if needed there. Great. All right, there were other few questions that I think what we will do is we will follow up individually one by one there. One question, I think Heidi reached out and say, can requirements be set with the renewal date? Absolutely. Jake, if you can go to the setup for a minute, please, student compliance. This is a good question that I wanted to answer here. So when you set up a document And and as Jake indicated, right, you're able to set different documents and guidelines for each of your cohorts. So class of 2022 might have a different set of guidelines as compared to class of 2023, especially as you evolve those guidelines. But let's take an example of a flu here. So let's click on this, please, and take an example of flu there. So Heidi, to answer your question, right, if you see the flu vaccination here, there is an option, advanced option that we have provided is, do you want to set expiration dates for the students? And when you set up this document in conjunction with the approved team, one of the conversations is, for example, on this specific document, do you want the expiration date to be entered by the students? Do you want this document to expire automatically within a certain duration? So you can say within 365 days of students uploading a document, I want this document to automatically expire, right? Or you can mass expire all documents, right? Or for a given document type on a particular date. So for example, you as a school have a guideline which says, I want all students to turn in new flu shots on October 1st. You can say that on September 30th, I want all of the documents to expire in the system, right? So we have given you that level of control also that the team will be able to go ahead and put in the system. All right, great. A few questions around site-specific modules out there, like My Clinical Exchange, Castle Brand Bridges, ACE Map, and stuff like that there. Unfortunately, Exxat doesn't connect to the different site modules out there, but I think some of my PT friends would have also listened into the webinar last week that we did. Exxat is in the process of rolling out its own specific site module called Exxat One there. And one of our goals with Exxat One is similar to how you have Exxat Prism for schools. Exxat One will be created for the sites, and then that will be used to manage all of the site-specific requirements with the approved team there. All right, perfect. I think that is all of the questions that I can look at, Jake. So having said that, let's hand it over to Jen.
Perfect.
Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Let's hand it over to Jen.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. Like they've said, my name is Jen Miller. I am a PA, and I am the Director of Clinical Education at Shenandoah University. We switched over to the new PRISM platform kind of kicking and screaming last year. I had taken this position. I had been in didactic work leading up to it and taken the position of clinical director in the fall of 2021. And it took me those 3 months before our clinical year started for me to really understand version 3. And so then when PRISM was released, I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the bandwidth and kind of was resisting change. But I went to a webinar and was like, wow, it looks so much nicer. It's a cleaner visual format. It's organized in a way that allows for each person to have the access that they need and not have the access that may cause internal errors. And so I convinced the PA program to switch over pretty quickly after that first webinar. And then slowly but surely, we've dragged the other programs along with us. And I think we all can say that we haven't been happier that we made, I mean, we couldn't be happier that we made that change. It's definitely, if you haven't switched to the new interface, I know that's not what we're talking about, but I would totally encourage that. It has made our lives so much easier, particularly as we are undergoing our renewal of accreditation. So to speak towards Approve, I want to just kind of lay the groundwork just from our personal experience. So we have a student, like many of you, we have a student wellness center on campus. Our PA program houses about 60 students per cohort, and at any given time we have between 2 and 3 cohorts. Of course, the students are required to keep the university requirements on file with our wellness center. But like many of you know, during COVID, our wellness center was just inundated with illnesses and trying to, you know, for us, unfortunately, they had to bear the brunt of making the university guidelines because this is where our medical professionals were mostly housed. And so I think during that time, it really came to head that the consistent management and update of medical documentation and then the communication between the wellness center and individual programs, there was a disconnect. And so then what we did is we said, well, we'll do it on an Excel spreadsheet. And as you all who are using Excel spreadsheets know, spreadsheets are great and wonderful, but they're only as good as the person updating them. And when you have many, many hands in a spreadsheet, things can become an error very fast. And so we were looking for a new way to do this, especially as we were ramping students up for what all they needed to do for the clinical phase. And so we moved to the Approve platform. And this has been one of the biggest time savers for our clinical team. A lot of the documentation requires someone with at least some medical knowledge to look at. And what we have found is that it is freeing up our educators on our team to be able to really focus in on education as opposed to reviewing medical records. I will speak a little bit about the process. Many of you have worked with Exxat for years and may have already switched over to Prism, but similarly to your onboarding with Prism, or if you're using the curriculum aspect of Exxat, similar to your onboarding with that, there are some scheduled meetings that you'll have with your Exxat team. And during those meetings, there are a lot of questions, a lot of answers about what documents, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I saw a question flash by earlier that said, why can't we edit the compliance documents? And I agree in theory that that would be nice, but I think what sometimes that aspect leaves out is the understanding as to sometimes we'll say this is the requirement, but then, for example, Spikevax, we know is an acceptable booster, but maybe when they get the paperwork back from the pharmacy, it doesn't say, is it monovalent, is it bivalent? And so those meetings allow us to be very specific about extra things that we may not automatically think of. And so we can go into in-depth detail. And then as time goes on, if you need to make changes, communicating in real time with your team will allow there not to be less communication. At least that's been my experience. And I guess I should have said from the beginning, Exxat didn't prep me for this talk. So I'm truly being genuine. They didn't send me a list of please don't say this or please say this. So I think that the reason for that is to allow for some of the nuance that maybe as medical professionals, you may already have integrated into your brain without any difficulty, but maybe communicating that on a compliance list inside of Exxat is not the best way. So you have those onboarding, initial uploading of documents, and then the Exxat team has already reviewed with you the student communication and reminders. One thing I still struggle with, because I'm an eternal optimist and I am still at 42 years old, extremely naive in this world. And I always believe that everyone is always doing the highest quality work and the best that they can. But what I have learned in my time in education is that that might not always be true with students. And so a lot of times students will say things like, I didn't know, nobody told me. And what is the beauty of the student communication and reminders through Exxat is that there's a log. It even lets me know actually when the student opened the email. So not only that the email was sent, but I can see when the email was sent to the student. And this just helps us be able to track students that may need remediation and professionalism issues, or students that we may have to pull from a site because something has expired that would violate our contracts with those sites. So I think that that function and feature is extremely helpful. It's always there. I don't have to dig through my email to find it. I just simply look up the student that is bringing up a question, and I can really find the paper trail or electronic trail right there. I will say that my experience with the Approve team has been responsiveness. They're much more responsive than I am to email. My schedule a lot of times has me in meetings like this where I'm not consistently looking at my email, but anytime I have sent an email to the Approve team at Exxat, I've had significant responsiveness, and if I don't respond within 24 hours, there's a follow-up email saying, hey, we received this email from you, but we haven't heard back. And so I think, I can definitely speak to that being a significant improvement in our communication, both internally and then to the students. Exxat has always responded to us with kindness and with patience, and to our students the same way. And I have nothing but great things to say. Another feature that I didn't put on this slide, but I spoke about when I was answering somebody's question in the chat was there is a newer feature now when Exxat Approve team needs clarification. So if a document is submitted with some slight variability from the information that we set forth in our initial meetings, the Approve team can flag us to say like, hey, you know, do you want, we're seeing this come up a lot. Do you think that we should change this? Or this looks okay, but it's slightly different formatting than what we've seen submitted from other students. Do you think that this should be approved? So the default is to just decline something or deny something or disapprove it if it doesn't match the recommendations. But the Exxat team, what I have really liked is they don't operate as robots. And so if they pick up on nuance that they're seeing, they alert us so that we can look in to see if we need to change something or if we can allow them to approve something different so that we aren't having to enter those overrides. And so, you know, that's been my experience with this whole process with Approve. And I'm also happy to answer any questions. I think I would have to defer to Jake to show you any student things, just simply because of our FERPA protection. I don't have a demo. There was a question that I think is a good one. Can the students sign documents on this platform, or do they need to download, sign, and upload again? We require our students download and sign, I believe. Our students have access to Adobe, and we require them to use their e-signatures on there. But I'll let the Exxat team answer if there's another way.
Sure. So Mike, great question. If there are documents that you need students to sign, for example, agreeing to clinical handbooks, policies, and stuff like that, then typically you can set them up as attestations in the system too, saying I read the handbook, and that can double down as an electronic signature there too. There are placement level attestations built into the system too. What do I mean by that? Is before a student begins a clinical, you can say, hey, I have read, for example, the clinical site requirements, and I attest that I will complete all of them by 30 days before the clinical rotation begins. So depending upon your requirements, the attestations can also double up as a way for students to get those information built in or provided in the system through there. Jake, can you go back to the reminder emails for a minute? Toby wanted a quick review of that.
In the system or on the?
The PowerPoint is fine. Yeah. Yeah. So Jen, two things. Toby, sorry, two things. Actually, let's go into system for a minute. Jake,
okay.
Change my mind. It's easier to show it on the system, so Toby can follow along there. So Toby, when you go into a student, right? So let's go to summary. So let's say you're in class of 2022 there, right? And you click on the filter section on the right-hand side and say, oh, I want to see documents which are in a particular status. So click on status, Jake. And let's say get started, meaning students actually have not started to take some action on this requirement. So click apply. All right, so this are all the set of documents. Now you can see that Valerie has 3 documents. The third student here has 3 documents that she has not started as yet there. So now if you click the notification, which is now you've done the filter, right? Now if you click notification, the beauty is that it will remember what you have selected. And now you can just select Valerie, just select Valerie there, and then compose email there, and this will send out a reminder to the students, Toby, in terms of and this is a template that we have built in, but this is essentially the process that you can use to remind the students of some things that they need to take action on. Now this reminder can also be done for documents which are expiring over the next 30 to 60 days, right? Or if documents have expired or something has been disapproved, students have not taken care of that. You as administrators have capabilities of also sending out those manual notifications along with automated notifications going out from the platform itself there.
One thing I want to add to this is also, I don't know, you're not in a student, a mock student platform, but these email reminders are great and we utilize them. The Exxat team sends them at certain intervals, and then I sometimes go in and manually send them if I have a student that's not responding. But the other thing is if you haven't seen the student facing platform, they see on their platform immediately. It says notifications and compliance, and it will have like a small number beside it, just like your text messages do, saying like, you need to click on this, and then it will tell you exactly what is missing. And so there's multiple ways, I think, visually they're alerted every time they log in.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. And then Catherine, I know you had a question about attestation, so we will reach out to you and show you how the attestations can be set up of time. Sheetal, you might want to answer this question. How far ahead of a requirement being expired is it considered expiring?
30 days is what the system has built in right now, and we will be able to soon customize it to what you would like to set it to.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheetal. When those email reminders go out and the student responds, who gets a response? Heidi, when you are sending out those email reminders, you can set up a reply to in that email, and the reply to will go to that person. This is great because, if you have multiple co-DCEs in a program, you might want one person to just review compliance section, one with the placement request, so on and so forth. So as Jake is showing you, when you compose an email, there you see the reply to is set to Jake.Killian. So automatically the system defaults it to who is logged into the system, but you can always override it. And if the reply to wants to go to a distribution list, right, or a common mailbox you have set up in the program, Heidi, it can also be going towards that too.
Can also be used to send yourself a test as well. So if you want to test the email before it goes out to see what it looks like yourself, you can use the override function here.
Okay, great. I think perfect. One question from Diana: are the summary reports able to show expiration dates? Absolutely, Diana. So if you go to a student record here, Jake, let's go to students and show an expiration report, please. So there are two ways. If you go to a student itself and go to K, click on K. Yeah, go to compliance. The document, the report, if you see the download report, the dates, which are expiration dates, will also get printed on the report too. Great, perfect. I think those were all the questions that I'm seeing in the question box. Sheetal, anything else that we might have missed?
No, we have answered most of them. Some of it is like some samples, etc. But I have responded to collect some email addresses. Perfect.
All right. If you go back to the PowerPoint, so if you are already an existing Approve client, if you use Approve, and if you have a question on your current Approve services, please reach out to approve@exxat.com. But for those who are just considering Approve, one of the frequent questions we get is, what should you expect when you want to move forward with Exxat Approve there? And similarly, as Jen hinted to, right, similar to your Prism onboarding, the Approve team, who's represented by Sheetal and Vipul and their team here, they will set up a call to initially get you up set up for success. About most of the folks typically take about 2 90-minute calls to set up the Approve system. It requires a team to understand your guidelines as plus the documents you want students to upload there. And then the Approve CSS will also train you on your staff on how to use the Exxat Approve services and how to send out the manual notification or how to override it itself. Sheetal, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of the onboarding, or Jake there.
I'd like to add one thing. Yeah, after the onboarding itself, we're never going to leave room for misinterpretation or gray area. So if there's ever a particular scenario that we come across and it's not specifically outlined how to handle that scenario within the guidelines itself, or we haven't previously established that, we are never going to assume on your behalf. We will always reach out to gather that clarification to say, hey, how would you like us to handle this particular document or student upload in this particular case? And we will use that as best practice moving forward for your program.
Fantastic. All right, I think that brings us to the end of the webinar. If you guys have one thing, yeah, Mark. Go ahead.
One more. So what does Exxat Approve accomplish that other programs cannot? Some of the things that make us unique, we provide a unique white glove onboarding experience. as well as we have experienced veterans that have been working with compliance for over 7 years now with profound subject knowledge. The main system, Prism, also seamlessly integrates with our service of Approve, where our team can step in and easily review those documents on your behalf. And then integration with the background check and drug screening firm, it makes it very easy for a student to request these checks or screens directly within Exxat. And once those results are available, they're just automatically loaded back into the platform. So it's not something you have to manually upload or worry about in that regard. Also, involvement with the community. We host frequent workshops, conferences, or webinars just like this one. And then finally, confidence in our service. Our contracts are non-binding. So if you move forward and you decide at any point that it's not a good fit, we're not going to hold you to that. We want you to have something that's a good fit for you. And that just about wraps it up.
Perfect. If there are questions, if you guys are interested in learning more about the Approve service or have questions about the cost, please reach out to us at sales@exxat.com. For any questions. We are also seeing some great client comments in the chat window. So thank you, Emily and team, for those comments. It's always great to hear satisfaction with the Approve service there. Perfect. I think with that, we come to the end of the webinar. Jake and Ami, thank you all for joining. Appreciate your time today. And you should get a recording of this webinar with the slide deck in the very next few hours there.